All right. I have some questions. Will all the people whose favorite color is green raise your hand? All right, thank you. You can lower your hands. Will all the people whose favorite season is summer raise your hands? All right, thank you. And one more. Will all the people whose favorite food is a fruit raise your hand? Okay, there's a couple of you. Well, thank you very much. Now let's think about that. I don't particularly love green, but I don't hate it either. So those of you who love green, you're okay in my book. Summer, though, it is my favorite season. So those of you who love summer, you are exactly like me in every way. And for those of you who love fruit, and there wasn't too many of you, so that's okay, but what's the matter with you? I hate fruit. We must obviously disagree on everything. Of course, this is ridiculous. It's gross overgeneralization. But how does that feel? How does this feel? All Black people say. All Latinos are. All gay people believe. It doesn't feel right because it isn't true. We live the reality that every person is different, every individual unique, and yet we keep sorting ourselves and sorting others into these broad categories. There's a reason for this. In the time of our ancestors, when tribal groups were competing for scarce resources, classifying someone as in or out was a matter of survival. If you took too long to figure it out, you might not live to know that you took too long. Sorting was necessary. But today, that same instinct causes far more harm than good. We pigeonhole, we stereotype, we flatten. We imagine we know what someone thinks and feels or believes based on one single piece of identity. And so I want to ask on this Kol Nidre, what happens when we say, all Jews believe? We know it's not true. The only thing that all Jews agree on is that Jews don't agree on anything, right? It's an old joke, and it's also a deep truth about our people. But from the very, very beginning, there's never been a unified Jewish voice. Even in the Torah, the Israelites were never of one mind. Last week, I told you about how they wanted to turn around and go back to Egypt because slavery was something they knew and freedom was scary. And then later on in the wilderness, Moses' leadership was challenged again and again. For example, Korach and his followers, they wanted new leadership and attempted a coup. And others longed for meat instead of manna. They even wanted idols in their lives. And these things didn't happen once. They kept on happening. And then later on in biblical Jewish history, under the monarchy, Israel was united for only 3 kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, before Solomon's sons split the kingdom into 2. Unity, if it ever existed, was fleeting. You know me, I like history. Let's walk a little more. Let's fast forward to the Babylonian exile. When Cyrus of Persia conquered Babylonia, he allowed the Jews to return to Israel, and many did. But many stayed in Babylonia, building a strong diaspora community. The Jews who returned brought with them a vision of purity and exclusivity that clashed with some of their fellow returnees and also with some of the Jews who had stayed behind, who had never left. And that choice, to stay or to go, there wasn't a right or wrong choice there. It created the framework for the diaspora of Jewish life. It sustained us for over 2,000 years. Division, in this case, ensured survival. Let's jump ahead another couple centuries. The Maccabees. We tell the story of Hanukkah with them as heroes. But at that time, they were not beloved by all. Many Jews were quite comfortable under Greek culture. It was only when Antiochus tried to force conversion that resistance caught fire. And even after that victory, the Hasmonean dynasty produced as much internal strife as external threat. From that era comes the most famous split of all, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, bitter opponents with radically different visions of Judaism, antagonism that ran so deep that by the time Rome rose up to power, Jews were already tearing themselves apart from within. The destruction of the temple could have ended us, should have ended us. Instead, Rabbinic Judaism emerged, not out of nowhere, but out of the lessons from the Babylonian exile, weaving together a portable Judaism that could travel anywhere. The Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds, yes, there's two, they connected far-flung communities. But unity? No. Disagreement was preserved in the very text itself. Machloket, debate. It's a core Jewish value. These and these are the words of the living God, said the rabbis. Disagreement itself was sanctified. Jewish learning is couched in terms of debate. Let's move to the 18th century. The Baal Shem Tov brought mysticism, song, and joy into Jewish life. He said you can meet God in prayer, in dance, even in daily work. His followers, the Hasidim, embraced this, but others, the Mitnagdim, literally the opponents, saw this as a betrayal of serious Torah study and a mockery of appropriate prayer. That rift was bitter and even violent. For decades, Hasidim and Mitnagdim would not pray together, marry each other, or even eat at one another's homes. Today, their descendants look indistinguishable in religious observance, but in their own time, this was a painful and even existential divide. By the 19th and 20th centuries, modernity brought even more division. Reformed Jews began praying in the vernacular, relaxing dress codes, mixing genders in worship. Orthodox Jews held fast to tradition, and secular Jews embraced Enlightenment ideals and often left religion behind entirely. And then came Zionism, splitting Jews even further. Was the dream a secular state like other modern nations? A socialist utopia? A religious return to biblical law? Or should Jews reject statehood altogether? By the early 20th century, Jewish society was a kaleidoscope of movements, ideologies, and visions. And now in the 21st, we can marvel at the many colors and textures of the tapestry that is modern Judaism. So to be clear, Jewish unity has never been the norm. And yet, today's divisions feel especially painful. For many of us, for me, the central fault line is Israel. I have been yelled at in synagogue for saying that Israel's government is acting immorally. I have seen Jews rip each other apart online. Families have been split, communities are fractured. And these days, Israel is not one fault line that fractures us all, but many. End the war, bring back the hostages, create a Palestinian state, return the West Bank, support democracy. Each of these can and has engendered passionate debate and wildly divergent views. Part of the problem with all of that is the narrative. I grew up on the Zionist story. Holocaust survivors, building kibbutzim, brave underdogs, fighting for survival against impossible odds, a people making the desert bloom. No one told me that those borders on the maps, that they were contested. No one mentioned the Palestinian story. Eventually, I realized this was a myth. Like every nation's founding myth, it contained truth and it contained lies. But an honest education must contain both. This summer, I read 2 pieces that kind of brought this home for me. The first, by Joshua Levison, a former head of school for a Jewish day school, writing for the Shalom Hartman Institute, said, "The conventional Zionist narrative depends upon keeping the Palestinian story nearly totally hidden. For reasons both practical and principled, I no longer believe it is acceptable for us to silence the Palestinian perspective. Reframing the Zionist narrative seeks to support the righteousness of the Jewish national project while also acknowledging some of its uglier realities." You may not see the radical in asking for history to be taught from a balanced perspective, but historically, that's never been well done. We all know the saying, history is written by the winners. And while simplistic, this is true. But history is also a living thing. We have but to look at our own national parks and institutions and what the powers that be deem appropriate to teach. Narrative also includes understanding of who is Israel, seeing that Israelis are not a homogeneous group, but a patchwork of factions and parties, sharing some ideals and fighting bitterly over others. Lumping them all together as one is doing them and doing us a disservice. So the second article was from Fania Oz Salzberger, the daughter of Amos Oz, and an acclaimed academic in her own right. And she wrote in the Financial Times, "Israel's remaining true friends and Palestine's true friends are invited to support our pro-democracy civil society, especially the peace-seeking part. Reasonable governments should sanction or punish Netanyahu, but beware of rewarding Hamas. Israel, the true Israel, is no longer its government, but its civil society. Please consider whom you support and think carefully about whom you punish." Both voices remind us there is no such thing as all Jews believe. There never has been. What there is a people of countless voices, countless disagreements, and countless truths. What there is nuance. And that is the work of Yom Kippur, to look past myth and face reality, to see the fractures and the pain, but not to give up, to name wrongs, even those done in our name, to remember the calling we still share. What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow person. On this Yom Kippur, may we let go of the myth of all Jews or all Israelis. May we embrace the messy, complicated, beautiful truth that Jews are a people of all colors and stripes, of all political persuasions, of all walks of life. May we have the courage to turn our faces toward the fractures clearly. May we have the humility to hold multiple truths. And may we walk forward into this new year, not united in sameness, but bound together in our shared pursuit of justice, peace, and dignity for all people.